You're listening to the SBA Loan Experts Podcast, your source for information, tips, and education on the SBA loan program from SBA expert Chris Hearn, founder and CEO of Fountainhead, the nation's leading non-bank SBA lender. Here's your host, Chris Hearn.
My overall perception is this was collectively the largest government expenditure since World War II. Almost just for PPP alone, it was almost $800 billion and almost 12 million loans. It's an order of magnitude above anything SBA had ever done by far. And I think it was important, and I think it was helpful. I think at the time we didn't know collectively as a country what was about to happen. We didn't know if we were all going to get the virus and die, or this was the apocalypse, or anything like that. And this was really, I thought, it was rather impressive that this massive piece of legislation came together in 9 days. It was passed unanimously. And it was all meant to stabilize the economy and focus on the small to mid-sized businesses, as opposed to the last recession, the Great Recession, let's call it, in 2008 to 2010, where it was focused on the largest companies. So it was certainly a shift in public policy, which I think was appropriate, because there's so many more small and mid-sized companies than there are, the largest corporations, the ones that are household names and have very strong balance sheets. So I think it was appropriate. I do think it was successful. It's unfortunate that so much of the headlines these days concern fraud and misuse. Yeah. But when you have almost $1 trillion floating out there and almost 12 million loans made, there's going to be some bad actors. It's definitely going to happen. Right. So, but overall, I think it was a positive for the economy, and I think it saved a tremendous amount of jobs. It prevented more anxiety and hysteria, because we certainly dealt with a lot of that panic and hysteria at the time. But I think overall it was a positive. Yeah, we're a little bit over 80% of all of our loans made have been forgiven, and we made almost 300,000. So I think we're down to 51,000, something like that left. The problem is that's going to be the toughest loans to get forgiven, because most of these folks have been just horribly apathetic. I'm not sure why exactly. I mean, we have been sending out emails every other day, and even text messages every other day since since September of last year. So, and that's how we whittled it down quite a bit. And I would argue our efforts in this regard, the outreach to the business owners to encourage forgiveness, I think our outreach has been tremendous. Probably compared to some of the folks I know in the lending community, what they've done. But it's interesting. I mean, I think the government did the right thing with their direct forgiveness platform for the loans under $150,000. That process literally only takes about 5 minutes. We were honored that they reached out to us as one of the most active PPP lenders. We were the 6th most active last year, and they reached out to us for some feedback, and they incorporated some of our feedback, which was terrific. And I think it made the whole process a bit better. But it takes 5 minutes, generally speaking, to do that. So the fact that we've got 50-some thousand of our borrowers alone, probably if you extrapolate that out, there's probably 1.6, 1.8, 2 billion. It should be 2 million. Sorry, I get sometimes these days I say billion, I mean million after all. There's a few more months left in the the deferment of the payments period for the loans that were made in 21. I mean, but all of that pretty much expires this summer, and then you've got a couple months to wait. If you're a lender, you send out a monthly statement, and if they don't respond within 2 monthly statements, then you can submit it to SBA for guaranteed purchase. And unfortunately, it's something that hasn't been talked about a whole lot, but that process is not exactly simple or fast. It probably takes, I would estimate, 15 to 20 minutes for an experienced SBA lender to submit for guaranteed purchase to SBA, and then it takes SBA another 15 to 20 minutes to process one. Yeah, I think first of all, the employer firms, which was really the focus of the 2020 PPP loans, the first draw loans, and later letting them do second draw loans as well. I think that was, most of those folks, I think, for the most part, I don't think it's an unreasonable statement to say most of those folks ought to have the capability, the resources to, correctly submit for forgiveness, assuming they use the proceeds for eligible purposes. Where it gets a little fuzzy is, of course, in 2021, the intent of Congress shifted to be more of, the sole proprietor, the Schedule C and Schedule F filers, which obviously, that goes to people that are, they're the business owner, that's it. They don't necessarily have the resources. They certainly don't have the staff, for instance, to do things like this. And I think there's still a bit of an educational gap there. There's certainly some delay. Some would argue that those folks are some of the busiest ones out there. And they just frankly haven't had time to get to some of those. But I haven't really noticed any racial or gender disparities here. Certainly, we made a tremendous amount of loans to minority communities, but we didn't track it, even though in 2021 you could track it based on borrower submitted information. They could check a box if they wanted to. I was frankly quite surprised that the vast majority of our applicants didn't check it, so that the government could track this. They don't want to be viewed just based on their skin color as much anymore. I don't know. Who knows? Unfortunately, there's a little bit of an incentive, I suppose, for lenders to not have been as vigorous with their outreach at this stage because, remember, the government, the U.S. taxpayer, is covering these payments, particularly the interest costs on these loans, while they're in the deferment period. So, I'm sure there's some lenders out there, and it sounds horribly nefarious, but I'm sure it happens, who are just kind of milking this and waiting to as long as they can before they really start pushing, for mass forgiveness because, they're making a little bit of interest on this. Now, it's not a lot.
Yeah.
It's, 1% per annum. But if you're a really active lender, or, even if you're a community bank that made a couple thousand, that might be a material dollar amount for you. And so there's this sort of perverse situation where some people probably aren't as incentivized to encouraging the forgiveness as fast as possible. And frankly, I'm still a little bit mystified by this because had Congress, with SBA's encouragement, offered some sort of blanket forgiveness, particularly for the smallest loans, probably would have saved the government a lot of money. Just in just sheer labor hours and processing, but also the interest costs. I mean, if they would have said, what are we to the end of March? If they would have said that the program basically stopped, let's call it end of June. If they would have come out last August and said, okay, if your loan is less than $30,000, we're going to go ahead and forgive you, it probably would have saved billions of dollars in interest costs.
Right.
I mean, it would have been massive. And it would have allowed the lending community, frankly, to get back to doing regular business loans. And the forgiveness process effectively is going to come to a close here, late summer. But then, as I've mentioned, then the next shoe to drop is going to be all the loans that are not forgiven or haven't even started the forgiveness process and not responded, not made a payment. All the lending communities submitting those loans for guaranteed purchase, working on it, then submitting to SBA for SBA to approve it. I mean, that's going to be a massive lift for everybody. And I am concerned about it, and I've expressed this to SBA. Sent another white paper. I think I'm up to 7 or 8 white papers for the last 2 years. I should just teach a class on PPP or something. So that does concern me.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast to be notified weekly of new episodes and head over to FountainheadCC.com for more about our SBA 7A and SBA 504 resources. Also, give us a follow. You can find us by searching Fountainhead on any of your favorite social media channels. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Fountainhead, the nation's leading non-bank SBA lender. Fountainhead's team of SBA experts will guide you through every step of the process and get your loan closed faster and more efficient than any bank. Apply today online at FountainheadCC.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the SBA Loan Experts Podcast.